The Las Vegas Raiders. In 2024, they became one of the rare teams to be bad at quite literally everything. They could not run the ball, they could not throw the ball, and they couldn't stop anybody else from running it or throwing it on them. It pretty much couldn't get worse than last year. At least it would be very hard to be worse. But luckily for Raider Nation, rock bottom seems to be in the rearview mirror. New coach, new quarterback, new philosophy, new everything. We could not have possibly chosen a better team to start this year's Bootleg Summer Series with. 32 episodes on 32 teams previewing the entire 2025 NFL season. That all starts today. In each one of these episodes, we use film, analytics, salary cap breakdowns, and all manner of nitty-gritty football nerddom to answer the three questions that make up the central pillar of this series. What was this team's identity before? What is their identity now? And what does a successful 2025 season for this team actually look like? It may be the middle of summer, but it sure feels like that autumn wind is brewing once again. Bootleg Football is back. We're happy you're here to join us along this journey. It's a long one, but it's a great one every single year. So please, Jay, finally, roll the intro.
Welcome back to the Bootleg Football Podcast, and more importantly, welcome back into the summer series, one of our biggest and best series of the entire year. I'm EJ Snyder. That, of course, is Brett Coleman, and it's appropriate that we're starting off with the Raiders because the Raiders are a team that has a lot of new heading into this year, but they're not the only ones that have new stuff. We've got a bunch of new stuff this year. What are we rolling out, Brett?
Well, in an effort to not bog everybody down every single one of these episodes, because we do talk about every single team in detail, and we always throw a bunch of numbers at people, whether it's coverage percentages, run concept percentages, cap allocation, blitz rates, passing maps, and we always have all this information. And we realize that it could be overwhelming at times, especially if you're just trying to listen to this in the car and kind of keep track of who's ranked what in every little nitty gritty category. And so for all the patrons that have stuck by us for all these years, and also for all the new patrons that we have joining us this year, we created infographics, very long, very detailed infographics for every single team throughout this summer. Of course, starting with the Raiders today, that has all of the information you could ever want that we're going to be referencing throughout this episode and referencing throughout every single episode. If you want to look at how much cover two this team ran on second down, you can find it in these infographics. If you want to look at, their passing maps, if you want to look at their cap allocations, pretty much anything you could think of is in these infographics. So we're not going to be bogging you down with every single number in these episodes. We're going to be kind of pulling out the important ones that really tell the story of this team. And if you really want every single number, if you're a patron, you can find that on the Bootleg Football Patreon, which is linked in the description below or in the pinned comment or at the QR code on the screen. Again, we will have a ton of information in this episode, but if you're a visual learner and you want an infographic form, you can find that there. Now, we mentioned setting the stage here. The three questions that we're going to be asking and answering throughout every single one of these episodes. What was their identity before? What is their identity now? What is their goal for this season? First half of this show is talking about 2024 identity, and in the Raiders' case, where everything went wrong. Second half of the show is what we think their identity is now based on all of these changes. EJ, I'll let you take it from there. Setting the stage, what was 2024 like for Raiders fans?
It was not great, and they know that already, so we are not going to drag you through the mud, but we do have to talk about it because it really does set the stage for all the changes that have already occurred and all the ones that are going to occur, hopefully, if you're a Raiders fan. So 2024 results, overall record 4-13. It did not work out the way they thought it was going to. They were fourth in the division, which is why we're starting off with them. 2-6 at home, 2-7 on the road, pretty consistent at home or away from the building. And their last 5 games, they really sputtered. They were 2-3 down the stretch. That's a major reason for the change. And we'll talk about all those changes in a second, but we are going to do power score again this year, but we've simplified it a little bit. We're just going to take 6 numbers that we really think define a football team. We're going to talk about whether or not they can run the ball, pass the ball, defend the run, defend the pass, how many points they put up, and how many points they allowed. We're just going to assign their league ranks. We're not going to worry about what the actual values of those numbers were. Where did they rank compared to their peers? So, with the Raiders, passing offense, they were 24th. Rushing offense, this is the part you're going to want to look through your fingers for, 32nd last in the league. Pass defense, 24th. Run defense, surprisingly, okay, 10th, their best number of their entire power score. Points scored, 29th, and points allowed, 26th. So you already know that the power score is not going to be great because all those numbers were in the 20s, except for rush defense, which was 10th, and rushing offense was actually in the 30s. So this was not a very powerful football team. And as we added up, they were the 26th most powerful football team in the NFL. According to us, their power score ranks them right down near the bottom of the league, and that's the reason that they made all these changes. It was sort of more of the same in 2024 as it was in 2023 and even 2022 to a point. So Raiders owner Mark Davis says enough is enough, make some big changes, but overall the Raiders couldn't do a lot of things well. There were some reasons for hope, not many. All these changes are going to give Raiders fans, we think, many more reasons for hope.
And reminder for folks that maybe haven't seen this series before, when we talk about all these ranks, we're talking about EPA per play, which is like the godfather of all macro stats, if you want to call it that, right? We don't use volume stats because volume stats can be really deceiving. You know, the old adage of, oh, you win 80% of your games when you run the ball 30 times. It's like, well, yeah, because you're probably already winning, so you're going to run more. So like those kind of stats can be really, really easy to manipulate. EPA per play, it's more narrow, which then makes it harder to misinterpret. I'm not saying impossible to misinterpret, but EPA per play is like a direct measurement of, okay, you got the yards. Were the yards impactful? Did they pick up first downs? Did they improve your field position? Did they get you into scoring position? And, you know, it's kind of like almost like a weighted yardage metric based on where you are on the field. So that's why we use EPA per play. And that kind of tease up really the meat of the discussion I wanted to have about this team, which is the difference in analytics philosophy versus, I don't want to call it like good old boy philosophy, but it kind of is, right? Where it's coaches that make coaching decisions based on what they hate to defend versus what the analytics will tell them, right? So you look at Pete Carroll teams as an example. Go back to Seattle. What are they known for? Running the ball a lot, especially in like neutral downs and distances, in the middle of the field, non-red zone, not in blowout situations, like neutral down, run pass decisions. Analytics tends to favor offenses that pass a lot on neutral situations on first down and generate explosive plays because you live and you die by explosive plays in the NFL. Whereas Pete Carroll teams tend to run a lot, especially in neutral situations on early downs, because what does Pete Carroll hate as a defensive coach more than literally anything? 2nd and 5. The man despises it. Every single defensive coach despises 2nd and 5 because they don't know what to call. Like, they really don't know what to call. Like, because you can see anything from that, and I think when you see all these quote unquote conservative defensive coaches or even offensive coaches that are offensive line coaches that become run game coordinators, that become offensive coordinators, and they just run and they run and they run. The reason why those types of coaches tend to favor running on early downs is because they know that defenses hate being in 2nd and 5. And the Raiders specifically couldn't do it last year. Like they were the worst rushing team in the NFL in a lot of the ways that matter, right? Average yards before contact per attempt. So how quickly the running back would get hit. They were the worst team in the NFL, especially in the A-gaps. Their center situation last year was garbage, which is why they're moving JPJ to center, because ideally he can save their inside zone run game by just not being terrible. And actually, I do think JPJ is going to be a good center, but that's besides the point. So if your running back is constantly getting hit in the backfield and you can't get into 2nd and 5, guess what you're going to do? You're going to stop running the ball on first down, which is what ended up happening with them. They were 32nd in the NFL in terms of run pass rates on first down because they knew they couldn't do it. So now you consistently put yourself in a situation where, okay, if we're throwing the ball on first down and it's incomplete and we're in 2nd and 10, we lost. We lost right there because now the defense knows, like, you can kind of just throw out a lot as a defense coordinator because you know there's only so many play calls that they have for 2nd and 10. Makes it a much easier offense to prepare for, a much easier offense to call against. And especially as the season went on, and you saw that the Raiders were kind of whittled down to only a select few options on 2nd and long and then 3rd and long, they couldn't do anything. They literally couldn't do anything. So I think there is value to running the ball in the sense that it keeps your offense ambiguous. And also, just to zoom out even further, and we'll have a Chip Kelly discussion about this, or a discussion about Chip Kelly as it relates to this. If you throw the ball on early downs and you fail consistently, and your offense is on the field for less than a minute of game clock, and then the other offense comes out and they run a 5-6 minute drive, and then you go out there and you throw, and all of a sudden your defense is on the field for the entire first quarter. Your offense is barely on the field. You're down 10-0. The game's over. At least when your quarterback is not Patrick Mahomes, the game's over, right? And so being a pass-heavy team on early downs when you don't have the quarterback to get away with being a pass-heavy team on early downs, you kind of just lose. So I think there should just be more understanding that the analytics really is a case-by-case thing, right? What analytics say you should do doesn't necessarily apply to every single team because not every single team has the personnel to do the thing that analytics say you should do, right? When Pete Carroll gets in there and he drafts Ashton Genty 6th overall and they're rejiggering, the offensive line and moving JPJ to center and figuring out right tackle and figuring out left guard, they're not doing it because Pete is stuck in the past. They're doing it because Pete is saying, we need to run the ball so we can be functional and give our defense rest. And we love Geno. Geno can get us out of trouble on a few 3rd downs every single game, but we need to not be down 10-0 in the first quarter. And I get it. I really do. I don't want to say analytics be damned, but I get it. I understand the philosophy.
I think it's taking the best parts of what you do like about running the ball and trimming off the sort of 3 yards in a cloud of dust thinking that a lot of fans think comes with that. They think those two things are welded together. That if you're running the ball, you're just doing it a certain way. And the first thing you're talking about is competence. And that's what the Raiders are trying to get towards, which is offensive line stability, just the flat ability to run the ball no matter how they do it. And drafting Ashton Genty, who is incredibly dynamic. We'll have a conversation about him down the road. So the first step is just, can we physically do it? And then as you get to that second stage, when you talk about nuance, yeah, running the ball is great because not only does it give you some stability and momentum, the ability you talked about to, string plays together and not be off the field in 3 downs. It also keeps your opponent from having extra offensive possessions, which, look, when you have to play Patrick Mahomes twice a year, that's a good thing as well. And then it's sort of, I think of it as cutting the fat from the run game, right? You don't just run to run. That was the adage forever. You have to run the ball just to do it. No, you do have to run the ball for all the good reasons we just talked about, but you don't have to do it just to do it. You're still looking for efficiency. You're still looking for explosive plays. You're still looking for diversity and keeping the defense on its heels because they don't know what to expect. And occasionally in a neutral down situation, you combine that competence that you've built, the physical ability to do it, with a little bit of a wrinkle. And that's really, I think, where Chip Kelly's going to add value to this team because he has evolved as an offensive play caller continually. But everybody that looked at Chip Kelly 20 years ago and said, oh, it's spread stuff and, you're going to have 4 wide receivers and you're just going to try and lighten up the box. That's not Chip Kelly anymore. It hasn't been for some time. So he's going to bring some of that I think, really modern nuance in the run game, looking for explosives with different types, confusing a defense. They're going to try and fuse that with the physical competence that they're building on the offensive line and in the running back room, and come up to the point where, yeah, we're going to keep you off balance because we can run the football. And when we do, you don't exactly know how it's coming. And we're going to get a few 7 or 8 yard gains, which were pretty rare for the Raiders last year. But then you're really in trouble. Then we're coming into 2nd and 3, and you as a defense are like, well, screw it. Here comes a shot play. And if you've got Geno back there, maybe you pay that off. But if you weld those all together and don't just kind of get into, well, we have to run 30 plays a game or else, you can have a modern NFL offense. And we started to see that shift in the NFL. We started to see the run game resurgence last year. And it wasn't just about getting bigger and heavier and doing it more. It was about all those things. It was about fusing creativity, picking your spots, and the physical ability to do it.
Except for the Rams. For them, it really was about getting bigger and heavier and doing it more. Sean McVay's like, yeah, we're going to run duo like 30 times a game, and it's going to work, and there's nothing you can do about it. But when it comes to the Raiders, or really when it comes to Chip, like I really want to dive into the evolution of Chip, because that is such an underrated storyline for this team. Because so many NFL fans, their last impression of Chip Kelly was either the short Niners tenure or even before that. I think it was 2013, the Monday night season opening doubleheader. And this was the first game that Chip was head coach of the Eagles, right? And he was fresh off of Oregon, and you saw the tempo. It was like the first time that you had really seen that kind of tempo at the NFL level. And even it was more tempo than what we saw with the Patriots a couple of years before that. Not to go on too much of a side tangent, but trust me, this all matters. Before the Boston Tea Party era really, took hold in 2011 in New England, Belichick and I think McDaniels was, or maybe it was Bill O'Brien, might have been Bill O'Brien. They brought in Chip Kelly to consult with them that offseason, and he really instilled in them this tempo mentality, right? And then the Patriots did it with 2 tight ends and like 5 slot receivers, and it worked, and they went in the Super Bowl. Crazy offense. And that was what Chip was known for, was tempo, tempo, tempo. Like, we're not going to give the defense an opportunity to set themselves up and get a call in and call anything fancy. Like, we're going to make them basically declare what they are before the snap and stay in it. And then when he got to the NFL and he took what New England did and just did it faster, well, didn't exactly take what New England did. New England just took the Earhart-Perkins offense and did it super fast. He took his offense and did it super fast. And that first Monday night game happened, and like you saw the Eagles get a first down, and Deshaun Jackson is like going like, let's go, roll it again, roll it again. And they're snapping the ball with 25 seconds on the clock. And everybody's like, oh my God, like this is going to change everything. And then they stalled, and they stalled a lot. And if you're looking at the Chip Kelly offense that year in Philadelphia, they had 12.6 possessions per game. That's a lot of possessions, by the way, on average. Like, again, on average per game. That means they had some games where it was 14, 15 possessions. But they had a lower plays per drive at 5.5 than even Chip at Ohio State last year. Chip at Ohio State last year was 5.9 plays per drive, which is actually fairly decent by NFL standards. But here's the kicker. They had 70 plays a game, which is a lot. 2013 Eagles, 70 plays a game, 26 minutes time of possession, dead last by like 4 minutes.
Yeah.
And so their defense was gassed and just consistently out of breath, and it just didn't work. It didn't work. And that was the first time you saw Chip Kelly, the college coach, realize that the NFL game is different. You can't do that for an extra 4 or 5 games a season. Guys get worn down. And the college mentality has always been about it being a volume game. Like, we're going to overwhelm you with volume, make you play 70 to 80 plays as a defense, and we're going to pop a couple explosives because you're going to mess up at some point. You can't have 80 snaps on defense and not screw up. And that's what college is about. It's about tempo, tempo, tempo. Even today, there's a lot of offenses that snap the ball between 17 and 20 seconds left on the play clock in college. Like I just looked up the data before we started recording this because I was wondering if anything had changed. Not really. But you look at Chip and the lessons that he learned from his Philadelphia tenure and then from his San Francisco tenure. And then you see what he did at UCLA, and then you see what he did at Ohio State. And he has slowed everything down. And he has now moved away from the college mentality. Even when he was still coaching in college, he moved away from the college mentality of volume and more towards the NFL mentality of efficiency, right? So I'm going to throw a couple numbers at you. These aren't in the infographic. They're just specific to Chip, but they matter, right? So Ohio State was 6th out of every FBS school, and there's over 130 of those. 6th out of every FBS program in the country on yards per play on second down. Why does that matter? Because the best offenses don't even get to third down in the first place. They get explosive plays on second down. That was what they prioritized. They were very aggressive. They were trying to stay out of third down. And then once they would get that first down conversion, they wouldn't tempo it back up. You know, they wouldn't have the Deshaun Jackson going, let's roll. Like, nope, we're going to slow it back down. We're going to eat more clock. They were the 8th fewest, or rather the 8th lowest, in drives per game among all Power 5 programs at 10.8. That was almost 2 possessions less per game than what he had when he was with the Eagles. Again, more plays per drive, 5.9 versus 5.5 with the Eagles. Only 63 plays per game. Very low by college standards. Syracuse was running 80 as a comparison. And yet, they were the 4th most efficient offense in all of college football in terms of scoring drive percentage. Their average time of possession was 30 minutes and 20 seconds. Their average time left on the play clock was 11.7 seconds, excuse me. Not 20, 11.7. So he learned about what it takes to be efficient at the NFL level, translated that to college, and as a result, you know, I look back at that Tennessee game. Tennessee was running, 12 more plays per game on average than them, and you could see that like that team just looked worn down by the time they got to the playoffs. Like they looked completely worn down. Ohio State was fresh. Like in college football these days, like you're playing how many games a season now? Like you have 12 and then conference championship and then you got 4 rounds of play. Like you're playing 17 games. You're playing basically an NFL regular season. So Chip was like, we're in this for the long haul. We're going to run less plays per game. We're going to be fresher by the end of the year. We're going to focus on efficiency. And they basically just ran an NFL offense. So all that to say, I know that was a long way to go for a short drink of water. All that to say, Raiders fans should feel comfortable with Chip Kelly as OC because he's not running a college offense. He is running an NFL offense that has college flavor. Like you're going to see a bunch of GT counter. You're going to see a bunch of really fun screen designs. You're going to see like Dan Casey, he posted just a nasty little slide route they had off a fake GT. Like you're going to see all the fun like Oregon DNA as far as just manufacturing space for guys, but they're not going to do it 85 times in a game. They're going to do it 60. And that to me is the best of both worlds. And it's why I'm actually really, really excited for this offense because it finally almost feels like Chip Kelly's the guy to unite NFL philosophy with college creativity and put them into one offense.
Yeah, I think taking all that creativity, but not adding in throwaway plays, right? It's not just like throwing stuff at the wall. It's saying, no, everything we're going to do for a reason. We're going to do less of it, but we're going to focus on executing that, keeping our guys fresher for the long haul, like you said. And that's a serious adjustment. And there's been adjustment in play calling from all the stops you mentioned, but there's also this adjustment in philosophy, in tempo, in, I'll just say, management of the game, right? And that's management of players, management of efficiency, balance of run and pass, how you're building those runs and passes, and mixing them together. And that's always been the alchemy of play callers. I don't care what level you're at, whether it's high school, college, pros. It's finding the right mix for players. And he thought he had it when he got to the Eagles, and then he realized all the reasons that it wouldn't work. And he's continually adjusted. So one of my favorite things about Chip Kelly is that continual growth. And it just feels like a lot of elements are in the building at the right time that are going to work together. So it makes me pretty hopeful. Whereas a lot of times you get a coach coming in and there's a piece of the reputation and people really gravitate to that. And you're like, yeah, but is that going to work in this building with this personnel, with this league? And the answer before for Chip has been, maybe. Not really. And the answer right now is, I don't know. I think it's got as good a chance to work here as it ever has because he's continued to evolve.
Now, on the defensive side, this is going to be a much shorter discussion because a lot of their issues on defense last year came down to injuries. Not that they were like the most talented defense, but they did sustain some pretty key injuries, especially up front on the defensive line. And the identity of this team defensively last year was supposed to be the defensive line. So when you invest a lot and rely on that unit a lot and all of a sudden guys are missing games, it makes sense why they kind of, let's just say, underwhelmed defensively. Again, you guys saw the EPA per play numbers. Overall played well against the run. Against the pass, if you don't have an elite secondary and you don't have the pass rush that can cover for not having an elite secondary, you kind of don't have anything. And Patrick Graham, like, God bless him, he tried his best. And there's a reason why he got retained, and he's been a DC for 3 consecutive Raiders head coaches in the last 3 years at this point. Because everybody knows Patrick Graham is a good coach. Everybody knows Patrick Graham knows what he's doing, and he just didn't have, he was a sculptor without a lot of tools last year, to put it bluntly. I think the interesting discussion to be had here when it comes to the Raiders defense is also one that we don't really have an answer for, which is how does Patrick Graham's blitz-heavy New England DNA mix with Pete Carroll, who typically in his defenses over the years, it's been a lot of, all right, we're playing cover 3, we're protecting the post. It's less about being fancy and deceitful and more just about, execution. If we're all going to be wrong, we're all going to be wrong together. Like, we're not going to have busted coverages, and we're going to rush with 4 and trust our D-line, which, again, the Raiders do have a talented D-line. I'm very, very interested to see how those two things kind of mesh together. Not that I think there's going to be a conflict, but I just want to see what they do. Like, what is their 2nd and 5 answer, right? Because then we know defensive coaches hate that. Like, are they going to be a pressure team on 2nd and 5, trying to get TFLs to back you up in a 3rd and long? Are they going to try to play it safe because they know that teams like to take shots down the field and they don't want to get got deep down the field? Like, I really, really can't wait to watch this defense for that reason. Not because I think they're going to be bad. I just want to know what they are. And right now I have no idea.
I want to see if Pete Carroll has continued to evolve, because he has throughout his career, but you can't stop in this game. It's dynamic. And Pete's been out of the game not very long, but there were even some questions about what he was doing in the end of his tenure at Seattle. Has he continued? Has he taken that time off to continue to learn and adjust and say, hey, I'm going to throw some modern flair in, just like we talked about with Chip Kelly? And I think you're right. By mid-season, we're going to have a pretty good idea of which concepts are winning more than which coach, right? Which concepts are they leaning on? And that comes down to good coaches. And I do think Pete Carroll is a very good coach, to be clear, leaning into this is what this group of guys can do well, right? This is a different team than my last team. They have different strengths and different weaknesses. These are the concepts that are working for us, and really honing in on those. And last year, there just weren't enough tools left on the field to really get a good idea of like, oh, this is what they want to do. It's like, this is what they have to do because this is what they have left. So again, a fresh look, a fresh coach. It's going to be fascinating to see how that balance shakes out. And geez, I hope they're healthier, because there are a lot of good players missing time last year for the Raiders on defense. And it's going to be a much more exciting defense to watch if those guys are out there.
So kind of a midway check-in here, answering the question, what was their identity before? It was a team that ran more 12 personnel than anybody else because that was their best offensive lineup. You would think that all those big bodies would help run the ball. It didn't. So it was a 12 personnel team that couldn't run the ball, couldn't throw the ball, had a banged up defensive line, therefore couldn't really rush the passer until guys got healthy. Didn't really have the secondary to cover for the fact that they didn't have a healthy defensive line, so they couldn't stop anybody through the air. Decent against the ground game, and they didn't have a quarterback. And the building also was not, let's just say morale was not super high. So what was the identity before? Not great, to put it bluntly, not great. What is their identity now? It's a Pete Carroll football team, meaning they're tough, they're disciplined, they don't make mental mistakes. The vibes just from practice clips that I've seen seem pretty good relative to last year, because Pete's always been, a very positive guy. Like, he believes in positive reinforcement more so than chastising players. But I think they're going to be a tough, disciplined, especially with Chip's growth, control the ball, take the air out of it type of team. They're going to play as good a defense as they can. I still don't think that they're all the way there personnel-wise. They're going to play as good a defense as they can, and they're going to try to have 7 play drives on average, ideally get up to 10, control the clock, give Ashton Jeanty 400 touches, and see where it takes him.
Yeah, and they're going to play together. That's the other hallmark of a Pete Carroll team, is he's not much for division, and famously so in his tenure in Seattle, which was very successful. If you were going to try and stick up and say that you were different or more important or wanted to go a different direction, you were going to end up somewhere else. And it's going to take a while, just like you said with the defense. They're not there yet, but he is going to find out certainly this year who's on board with the program and who wants to play that style of football and who doesn't. And that will sort of lead into their roster construction in future years. But that's always been a sort of keystone of Pete's approach to success of football, is we're all in this together, offense, defense, and certainly there have been splits famously there, but he's not going to put up with that for a long time. You are going to play his way, and that way is very adaptable. Pete's a super positive coach, but he's also a guy personally that's a lifelong learner. He is always interested in pulling from some really wide, interesting sources on how to craft a group of people and have them pull towards a similar goal, whether or not they're athletes or football players or anything else. And he's done that his entire career. People thought that was a little woo-woo in the beginning, certainly back in his Jets tenure, but was kind of looking around like, what is he talking about? As he's demonstrated success at the NFL level over years and years, people are now, I think, much more quick to adapt and say, no, this is a workable system and I can either get on board or get out of here, but I know those are probably the only 2 options.
So as we kind of define what we think their identity is going forward, we're going to start off with the power structure. We talked a lot about Pete, obviously, but Pete and Chip and Patrick Graham are not the only people that are helping run the show there. New front office, bunch of really interesting assistants to talk about. EJ, I'll let you take the lead here. Who's calling the shots in Vegas?
John Spytek's the new GM, and again, this was a clean sweep for power structure because I think really that's what Mark Davis wanted. He's like, we've been trying to patch this together. We took an assistant coach and made him a head coach. We thought that was going to be the promotion that was going to kick us along. We recycled a GM from within the division. We thought that was going to, bring us some experience. It was a bunch of associated parts that didn't fit well together, and the results on the field showed it. So it was time for a clean sweep. If you're going to bring in a new head coach, you're going to bring in a GM with them at the same time and say, hey, you two are working together. You are tied together. It's a very popular approach in the NFL. This isn't, obviously, the Raiders aren't the only team that have taken this approach. We've talked about Chip Kelly as the OC, about Patrick Graham as the DC, Tom McMahon's the special teams coaches. As we get into the notable coaches on offense, it's all about experience for me. Greg Olson is the quarterback's coach. Highly experienced NFL coach, lot of water under that particular bridge. And Joe Philbin is the senior offensive assistant, one of my sort of ubiquitous favorite titles in the NFL. Just means, God, it's been around a long time, has been a head coach, has coached offense, has coached offensive line, just has a wealth of experience for the entire staff, not just Pete to lean on, but everybody else to say, hey, how would you do this? How did you do this in Miami? How did you do this at your other stops? And then Nate and Brennan Carroll. This is the Nepo Baby section of the podcast. Both of Pete's sons are on staff.
There's one every day. There's always a Nepo
There's going to
baby
be
on
one every day.
Somewhere.
Might not be the head coach's kid, but it might be their buddy's kid. And that's absolutely the case here. Now, to be fair to Nate and Brennan, they are not brand new. They just didn't roll into the Raiders building and be like, hey, I get a job. They have both been working in the NFL for a while now. So they do bring their own experience, not just their dad's. On defense and special teams, Joe Woods is the defensive pass game coordinator and DB's coach. Again, highly experienced NFL defensive coach that a lot of people can lean on. And the other name I wanted to bring up was Marcus Robertson as a DB's coach, former NFL safety Marcus Robertson, for those of you that remember his playing tenure. Yep, same guy. And Pete has always been one to bring NFL player alums into the coaching fraternity, and Marcus Robertson, just one of the latest in his long line of those very successful coaches he's brought from previous player ranks.
Now, when we get into everything this new regime did in March, because obviously when a new GM and new coaching staff, and when they all come in, they're going to leave their mark on the roster immediately, kind of because they have to, honestly. And the job of an incoming regime is to trim as much fat as possible and then sign big money extensions to the guys you know you're going to keep, which the Raiders did, or B, try to go bargain hunting in March just to fill out the roster as much as possible so that you can go into the draft without any screaming, glaring needs, which they also did. And you can kind of see that reflected in everything they did in March. I will say, as part of the infographic on Patreon, you get a full list of everything they did in free agency, as well as a full list of everything they did in the draft. But you also get a positional spending breakdown where we laid out the cap hits for every single position group for this team, as well as their ranks among all NFL teams for how high those cap hits are. I'm not going to give the whole thing away, but I will say this team is number 1 in edge spending, and they are number 32 in linebacker. And that is reflected in what they did in free agency. So again, I'm going to pick out some of the key transactions here. Jack Jones played a bunch of snaps for them last year. He's gone. Andre James, starting center, he's gone, which is addition by subtraction because he was a big reason why they couldn't run the ball in the first place. Gardner Minshew is now the backup in Kansas City. Alexander Madison, he's also gone. Divine Diablo and Robert Spillane are Falcons, or are a Falcon and a Patriot, respectively. That is a big reason why they are number 32 in linebacker spending, because their linebackers are no longer there, and they went bargain hunting and used the money elsewhere, i.e. on their edge rushers. Nate Hobbs is a pretty good DB for them, honestly. He's gone. He's a Packer. Trayvon Merrick is a Panther now. Caleb on Chason, also a Patriot. Patriots just plucked like half this roster, by the way. Robert Spillane, like I mentioned, is a Patriot. John Jenkins is a Raven. So, mostly addition by subtraction, but there were a couple that kind of hurt me a little bit because I think they're good players, but it was also necessary because they had to save money somehow, because you're bringing in a quarterback in Geno and you're signing Max Crosby and you're signing Malcolm Kuntz, which then, of course, brings us to the retentions. Kuntz got an $11 million deal. He is the 28th highest paid edge in the league this year. Max Crosby, very briefly, market resetting deal. He is at $35.5 million, which is the 3rd highest paid edge in the NFL. Probably soon to be 4th highest once Micah inevitably gets paid. But either way, we're talking about 2 of the top 29 edge contracts in the NFL when there's 64 starting edges. It's no wonder why they have the largest edge cap hit out of any team in the league. They also brought back Isaiah Polamau, the safety. They brought back Adam Butler, who has a ton of experience in this defense at every single stop he's been in. He's played in this type of system pretty much everywhere, and he's really good at it. As far as third-party additions, Alex Kappa, who, to be nice about it, didn't have a great last couple years. Maybe he rebounds. Maybe he's just a swing guard. Ideally, he's just a swing guard, but they brought him in to compete for that spot. Jeremy Chin, they brought in to probably be a Pete Carroll type of strong safety. Maybe they want him to be dime backer. He can do either one, so we'll see. Raheem Mostert, they brought in to be the veteran backup to Genty. Eric Stokes, presumably going to be a starting corner for them. Ian Thomas, they brought in to be TE3 and round out that room. Landon Roberts, like I said, if you're not going to pay Diablo and you're not going to pay Spillane, you're going to go bargain hunting. That's what he was. Again, they just don't want to spend at linebacker this year. So be it. And then, of course, the biggest of them all, even bigger than Max Crosby, Geno Smith was acquired from Seattle. He is at $37.5 million himself, which honestly, considering the quality of quarterback Geno is, $37.5 million, pretty darn good deal in my opinion. So that's kind of the overall philosophy they had in March was, we're going to spend as prudently as we can elsewhere in the quote-unquote non-premium positions, and then we're going to dump every other dollar we have into the premium positions, i.e. the guy throwing the ball and the guys that are tasked with getting the other guy who's throwing the ball.
It's an interesting roster rebalancing, and like you said, when a new power structure comes in, GM and coach, there is always going to be turnover. Typically, there's going to be at least 60% roster turnover within the first 18 months, within the first year and a half. That's how much churn is going to happen when old philosophy and new philosophy meet and the personnel doesn't necessarily match. So they are looking for bargains in places where they need them. I actually like the Landon Roberts signing a lot. I think he is going to be one of their defensive keys because he is explosive against the run, and they're going to be sending him to try and get those TFLs and turn, medium second downs into long third downs. And likewise, medium third downs into your drive's over, get off the field, because he is a missile against the run, and I think they're going to deploy him that way. So, but the Geno thing, like you said, is really the linchpin of their new regime. Without Geno, this team is very much the way it was last year, right? No quarterback in this quarterback-driven league means almost no chance to compete, and certainly so in the very competitive AFC West. The fact that Geno, I don't want to say fell into their lap, but fell into their lap is really sort of the tent pole that's holding up this entire circus. They can now stake their identity and reputation on offense around all the things that Geno Smith does really well, and there are so many of them. And he gives them legitimacy and experience at the position, which they did not have for the past several years. And as an offense, you're just not going anywhere without quarterback. We say it year after year in this series. If you don't have a quarterback, you have to do everything you can to get one. It was not a great year to get one in the draft, and the Raiders end up with one, but not just any one. A guy that's been playing at a near top 10 level and already has familiarity with Pete Carroll and loves him to death, would walk across hot coals for him. That stroke of luck, stroke of circumstance that brought Geno to the Raiders is easily the biggest deal that happened in the offseason for this team.
And I want to remind people how good Geno actually is. And I understand a lot of people maybe didn't watch Seahawks football last year, which you should, by the way. It's always great television. Can't guarantee they're going to be a great team, but they're always good TV. So you should watch every Seahawks game you can. But when you're watching Geno last year, when he was not pressured, he was one of the better quarterbacks in the league. The problem was he got pressured a lot. Seattle's team pressure rate allowed was literally highest in the NFL, 38%, or 38.1% to be exact. So, Titans fans are sitting there saying, we can't block anybody. And Patriots fans are saying, we couldn't block anybody. It's like, nah, you don't understand how bad Seattle was. Like, it was awful. And Geno hung in there and he took it. And I get it. There was some really bad turnovers, especially in the red zone. But if you're looking at just his numbers when he wasn't pressured, which there was a decent number of them because they threw the ball so damn much. So just on volume, we have a decent sample size here of non-pressured dropbacks. He was 8th in passer rating at 106.3. He was 5th in adjusted completion percentage at 80.7. He was 16th in big time throw rate at 4.1%, which, relatively speaking, pretty good. Turnover-worthy play rate, this is what people killed him so much for. Turnover-worthy play rate was 1.2%. That was 10th best in the NFL when not pressured. TD to interception ratio, he was third best at 14-2. And then time to throw, it's not like he was holding on to the ball forever, 2.48. That was eighth fastest in the NFL among starters. So non-pressure Geno is still pretty good. The problem is the pressured Geno showed up a lot more than you probably wanted it to, because they gave up more pressure than you really wanted them to. And it was unfortunate. I think Geno's reputation took a big hit last year, but it wasn't necessarily his fault. I think it was really more the offensive line and the play caller's fault, because A, they couldn't block, and B, the play caller kept calling pass plays when they couldn't block. So it was kind of on him too. I think Geno's a lot better than people think. I really do. And I loved this signing, but I loved it even more at the price point, which is very manageable.
And he's a great quarterback. If they can build that offensive line for the Raiders that they were not able to for the Seahawks last year, you're going to see a lot more good Geno. The other thing is Dome Geno is a real thing. A lot of times we talk about it, that players play better inside or outside. They're a mutter, they're a domer, or whatever. Dome Geno, even though he played outside the majority of the time in Seattle, his results were much, much better inside. And now he gets to play all his home games inside. Plus, when they go on the road, 50% of the time it's a dome. So that's going to be a real boon for Raiders fans. And I hope that y'all get to see Geno stay upright and be protected, because, boy, that is a great quarterback under those circumstances. And he will use all the weapons. He will spread the ball around. He is not a quarterback that locks on to receivers. He is incredibly accurate down the field, again, when he has a little bit of time. And he will make some throws that will open your eyes. You'll think, no, don't throw that. He'll fit it into the window time after time, and you'll be like, wow, he's incredibly accurate. He's got really good vision. You just got to keep him upright. And the Raiders are doing a lot to make sure that happens. Combine all those elements, loves the head coach, gets to play indoors, has some great weapons, doesn't have to do it all because, again, they're rebuilding the running game. We talked about that a lot at the top of this one. It's a very good setup for Geno Smith to be the best quarterback he can be.
All right, EJ, it's your favorite time of, maybe not even just this episode, might be your favorite time of the entire series.
Might be.
We finally get to talk about Ashton Jeanty.
We're going to fire up the Raiders draft with one of my all-time favorites in this draft, and that's Ashton Jeanty, the running back from Boise State. They get him at number 6, and the conversation around Jeanty as you move through draft season is always one of the things that I love to track, is how a player's profile rises or falls throughout the very long and very detailed draft process. And when it started, the conversation around Ashton Jeanty was like, I don't know if you can take a running back in the top 15. I don't care how good he is. Of course, my team was drafting at 10, and there were people saying, no way, if they take Ashton Jeanty or any running back at 10, I'm out. About a month later, it was like, I don't know. I could see it. I still don't want it to happen. A month after that, it was, yeah, I think he's probably the best pick at 10. A month after that, which was about 2 weeks before the draft, he's never going to be there at 10. We don't have a shot at him. And he didn't get anywhere near 10.
We argued about nothing since Christmas.
Correct. Let's talk about Ashton Jeanty, the player, a little bit, because he is a player that I believe can transform an NFL offense. And that's tough to do at the running back position because of the way the modern NFL is structured and the real focus on winning through explosive pass plays. Jeanty is a runner that will get you explosive plays regardless of how you block for him. If you block well for him, forget it. It's over. He'll run over you all day long. He is incredibly special. And when you start comparing him to looking at historical comparisons of him coming out of college, very quickly that list whittles down to like Hall of Famers. You're comparing him to LT's numbers. You're comparing him to Adrian Peterson's numbers. And that's the contemporary comparison for what he was able to achieve at Boise State. Now, physically, is he the same guy as that? No, but he is an incredibly gifted runner. He combines tremendous contact balance, great vision, really good cuts, and my favorite sort of underrated quality about Ashton Jeanty is he's got this sixth sense of when things are going to open or occur, and he gets ready just a tick before the defenders do. He makes the cut just a tick before that gap opens up. He sees that contact is coming and leans into it just before the defender does, so he ends up winning that collision. And he does it over and over and over again. It's almost like his film is sped up a little bit, or the defenders is slowed down a little bit, or both, and that causes him to win throughout the run, at the line of scrimmage, at the first contact point, down the field with a juke, and he just welds all those things together, and that's how he was able to amass so many yards in colleges, because he was getting everything out of every run over and over and over again. So an incredibly exciting player. I think a transformational player. Lands in an offense that wants to emphasize the run. You look at the backs that Chip Kelly had at Ohio State, both very good, both drafted up high, Travion and Quinshon, and now he gets to play with Ashton Genty in those concepts. I dig it. I dig the fit. I dig the value. I think he is a tremendous selection. Round 2, number 58, pick they got from the Texans. They go with Jack Besh, wide receiver from TCU, another player I think is wildly underrated. I think I had him as the 5th or 6th best wide receiver in this class, which was a lot higher than a lot of people were on Jack Besh, but I think he can do more than he did in college. One of those classic, might have a better pro career than he did in college, and he was good in college. Not one of those guys that didn't have statistics, but a very good number 2 wide receiver. Has great size. He's over 6 foot. He's over 200 pounds. A sharp route runner, aggressive with the ball in his hands, and doesn't just run 1 or 2 routes. I don't think he's necessarily cut out to be a number 1 in terms of the ability to go and win, especially down the field all the time. That is not his skill set, but everything else I think he can do at an above average level. And I think you're going to see Geno get very, very comfortable with Jack Besh, because he is reliable. He's there. He's got great hands. He makes himself available to the quarterback, shows his numbers, plays through contact. He's going to be not only a fan favorite, but I think a quarterback favorite pretty quickly in Las Vegas.
You forgot the most important part.
Oh, did I?
He blocks.
Yeah.
He blocks his ass off. Like, Pete's going to love him just for that.
Yeah, and Ashton Genty's going to love him. And the rest of the offensive line, because, again, offenses in general that you see explosive runs for. We talked about the importance of explosive plays, run or pass. If an offense is getting explosive runs down the field, the wide receivers are blocking. Always, period. End of story. Like, you don't get it without those guys blocking down the field. And again, I know the guy that's really going to love that in the building, and that's Chip Kelly, because he had it at Ohio State. Brian Hartline's wide receivers block like crazy. And being able to take a guy like Jack Besh and plug him in and say, hey, you know how to do this and you physically can, great, we're going to need you to. And you're going to see those plays get extended because of it. It is a very important and I think often underserved quality when we talk about wide receivers. Not everybody starts off with, oh, he's a great blocker. Or if that's the first thing you say, it means, oh, he can't catch. Not the case with Besh. Number 3, their 3rd round pick, number 68, Darian Porter, cornerback from Iowa State, a guy that I think both of us are pretty high on and thought didn't get talked about enough because of how explosive he was. Now, not the most experienced corner, but you're talking a guy well over 6 foot, about 6'3", fast as hell, athletic, not the greatest tackler, but incredibly gifted in one-on-one coverage, and had one of the highest rates I've seen in college of number of coverage snaps per completion. I think it was 38. It took
he never gave anything up.
It took 38 coverage snaps for him to give up a catch, not a touchdown, a catch. That's insanely high. So the ceiling is way up there. A lot of people leaned on, oh, he only really had 1 good year of production. He's only been at the position a couple of years. I'm not sure. Pete's going to love this guy.
Yeah, he's a 6'3" freak in nature that has ball skills. Like, it's the most Pete Carroll corner ever.
Yeah, outside of not being a heavy hitter, Darian Porter is very Pete coded. So great pick, I think, great fit. And again, the Raiders secondary needs more talent. Like you said, this form of their defense is not going to be their final form. Their 2025 form is not going to be the final form of their defense. They still need some more horsepower, but young players like Darian Porter going into 2026, having a year of experience, are going to add to the sort of base of that defense that sort of is the tide that lifts all boats. Another round 3 pick for him, 98, came from the Dolphins. This is Caleb Rogers, the guard from Texas Tech. Look, Raiders know they needed help on the line, and it wasn't in just one spot. They needed guard help. They needed tackle help. They knew they needed to move JPJ over to center. Caleb Rogers is their nod at that. Is it the nod I would have taken at that spot with that pick for guard? I think there are players I liked better than Caleb Rogers, but I appreciate the emphasis of we're not going to wait until the 5th round and pick up a couple of sort of afterthought guards. We like this guy. We think he fits in our program. We're going to pick him now.
He's also just an asshole. Like, I love how he plays, like, from a mentality perspective. You know, I don't want to invoke the name Richie Incognito because, like, I think a lot of people throw out the Incognito comp every single time they just see a guy who plays with physicality. But I'll tell you what, as far as just big square bodies that get dudes on the ground against their will, he kind of looks like Richie Incognito. Like, it might be low-hanging fruit. I don't care. He's really, really good. And I'm curious to see if he's going to win the starting job. And really, honestly, I'm curious what the whole starting 5 is going to be, because we know JPJ is going to be center, but as far as who ends up at right guard, who ends up at right tackle, like maybe it's going to be Glaze at tackle. I don't know. They're going to figure it out in camp, but I really do think Rodgers has a shot of winning that job, and he's certainly talented enough to do it.
So they round out the 3rd round with a 3rd pick, number 99, that they got from the Giants, also a compensatory pick. Charles Grant, the tackle from William & Mary. Again, small school prospect, but big school tools. Already moves extremely well. I don't think he is a right off the crack starter, but I think he has the ability to move into that role, even by the late season, depending on how well he picks up the speed and the physicality of the NFL. He might need another year of maturing, especially up top, just from a strength perspective. But in terms of tools you can't teach and his ability to move and use his hands, those are already high level. He's going to have to get used to the speed, and he's going to have to get a little bit stronger. But the talent is there, and that's what they're betting on as the base. The things they can't teach, the size, the reach, the feet, those are all there, and they think that's what's really going to be the building block for Charles Grant as he moves forward. Round 4, pick 108, Dante Thornton, the wide receiver from Tennessee. Here's your vertical threat. That's what Dante Thornton is there for. It's what he's good for.
I don't know if he can do anything else, but sure.
Nope, you sure can't, but getting into the 4th round, that's what you're going to bet on. This is a tall wide receiver with really good speed that was asked to do pretty much one thing at Tennessee and one thing only, and they're going to ask him to do the same thing. Yes, they're going to want him to round out the game, but that's not why they drafted him. They drafted him for his strength. His strength is being tall, fast in a straight line, and stretching defenses vertically. That's what he's going to do for them. Another round 4 pick for them, number 135, that they got from the Dolphins, also a compensatory pick. Tonka Hemingway, defensive tackle, South Carolina, absolute block, is going to contribute to that ability to continue to stop the run. Has some explosion to his game, but he's not really a sack threat, which is why he's going in the 4th round and not the 2nd round as a big SEC defensive tackle. He's got some of that in his game. He can certainly get you cleanup sacks, the occasional power sack. A few less of those probably could be expected at the NFL level, but a very good player, a very experienced player, and somebody that's going to be in that rotation. We talked about efficiency and sort of keeping people fresh on the offensive side. It's the same on the defensive side, if not more so. You need quality guys you can rotate through the defensive lineup because especially late in the season, you can't have defensive tackles with 700, 800, 900 snaps and expect them to be anything at the end of the season. They're going to be gassed out. You got to be able to rotate strong young guys. Tonka Hemingway is that for them. We get into round 6. One of my favorite players, I thought he would go before this. Pick number 180, J.J. Pegues, the defensive tackle / fullback from Ole Miss. Yes, I said that correctly. Had 7 rushing touchdowns at Ole Miss as a fullback, but is a slightly undersized, penetrating 3-tech. So the opposite of Tonka Hemingway in terms of this is a guy you expect to get up the field and get you pass rush from any of the interior spots. Pegues is a super fun athlete, basketball background, very coordinated, dynamic guy that, yeah, they might line up at fullback and have some wrinkles for because he's got experience there from college and he was effective.
Yeah, who needs Travis Hunter? we have our own two-way player.
Right.
Get wrecked.
Big guys get to be two-way players too. Round 6, I think this gets even more interesting. Number 213, a compensatory pick. Tommy Mellott, the quarterback for Montana State, but he's not going to play quarterback for them. He's going to play wide receiver, and this is a very purposeful move by them. Grabbing a smaller school player who they think has a skill set and is an absolute gamer. If you're not familiar with Tommy Mellott, go back and look at his backstory, how he ended up playing where he did, how he ended up winning that starting job. Impossible to root against Tommy Mellott, no matter where he's playing. But I think, again, this is probably his best pro position. And we have a long history of NFL wide receivers that played quarterback in high school or college and transitioned to the wide receiver position. They understand what their quarterback is looking for and looking at, and they can put themselves in better positions. Tommy Mellott, also a very good athlete and tough as nails, as is the other round 6 pick for them. Again, the third round 6th pick for them. Cam Miller, the quarterback from North Dakota State, who they do have playing quarterback for them. And very experienced starter for the Bison, tough as hell, but they are going to keep him there. And his efficiency numbers were pretty sneaky. I know a lot of people think, oh, North Dakota State, it's a run-first offense. They never ask the guy to throw. Not true.
Well, it is a run-first offense.
It is a run-first offense, but they do ask their quarterback to throw. And when they ask Cam Miller to throw, his efficiency metrics were up there. There were some categories. He was in the top 5 of this entire class. Now, again, didn't have the volume statistics, but if we're talking about efficiency, toughness, leadership, he's got all those things. And then in the 7th round, their last pick, number 222, Cody Lindbergh, the linebacker from Minnesota. If you're going to go bargain hunting for linebackers, 7th round's a decent place to do it. Probably going to start off as a special teamer, but again, there's opportunity in that linebacking room, so it's a good landing spot for a guy. You always kind of feel for players who get drafted in the 7th round. They were so close to being able to pick their own destination, but Lindbergh ends up in a pretty good one, at least in terms of roster opportunity.
I think, overall, when I look at these 11 picks before we even get to the UDFAs, I see identity. Like, I see a vision. I see a group that fits together, because Ashton Genty is obviously the engine of everything. But you got Jack Besh, who catches everything and is super tough over the middle and blocks his ass off. And, when you're in second and medium, third and manageable, which is ideally what this team's going to be in, a hell of a lot more than 3rd and 8, like, he's going to be the guy for you on that down and distance. And if you need an explosive play, you have other guys on the team that I think are better explosive players through the air. Obviously, Brock Bowers being the one. Even though he's a tight end, like, he's still probably their most explosive passing weapon. And so Jack Besh fills a much-needed role in that offense as the proverbial glue guy. Darian Porter, that's just Pete's next lab experiment. He can try to turn into something. Caleb Rogers and Charles Grant, I love both of those picks. Both of those picks try to shore up the offensive line that had a lot of issues last year. And now all of a sudden there's a starting 5 taking shape that I think is fairly respectable. Dante Thornton exists. JJ Pegues, I love the Pegues pick, not just as a DT, but as a fullback, because if this team's going to be not just in 12 personnel, more than every other team in the league, if they're in 22 personnel, more than every other team in the league, with JJ Pegues as the other part of that 22 personnel, like, we're cooking with gas there. Like, that's a really, really fun short yardage and goal line personnel grouping that you could do a whole lot of stuff with. And then Cam Miller, I thought he threw really well at Shrine Bowl. Like, he throws a good ball. I don't know if he's ever going to be a starter, but as like a fun late round lotto ticket that maybe he turns into a backup quarterback that's really cheap and therefore valuable, I like that dart throw. As for undrafted free agents that they brought in to supplement the draft picks, Jaw Joyner, the edge from Minnesota. This is about where I had him graded. I thought you could have started talking about him in like the 7th round, but getting him to round out the edge rotation, or at least try to compete for like the 4th edge spot, makes a lot of sense. Mello Dotson, because this team just needs so much help at corner, I could see him making it. He does really fit, less so Patrick Graham style, more so Pete Carroll style, as far as corners that play 7-8 yards off from the top down. He's more of a zone guy than like a press man-to-man guy. I could even see him converting to safety, honestly, but again, it's worth taking a shot and seeing what you can get. Zachary Franklin, the wide receiver at Illinois, the other Illinois receiver, Carter Runyon, the tight end at Towson. I actually didn't get to him, but I think you did. Laki Tassi, the tackle out of Australia, who I definitely didn't get to, but typically when you see an OT out of Australia, they're probably freaks of nature, so I'm just going to assume that he's really athletic. And then Jalen Walker, another notable UDFA at Indiana, the other Jalen Walker linebacker, much lighter than the Georgia version. He's like 220, played around 215. He's like a hybrid safety linebacker type that's probably more of a dime backer for them. But, overall, a lot of good players. I think they all make sense. I think they all fit into very particular roles that mesh together well. And then, if you end up getting a starting offensive tackle out of Australia, not bad. Pretty good value there.
Worked out for some teams in the league. My favorite thing about the UDFA process for the Raiders is that they're taking advantage of every opportunity. International Player Pathway Program, again, picking up dollars that other teams dropped in the draft. We talked about how thick this draft was in the middle with depth, meat and potatoes draft. Guys that had draftable grades. Ja Joyner had a draftable grade. Mello Dotson absolutely had a draftable grade. Carter Runyon, again, athletic tight end from a lower division that was really productive. Great dart throw for them. Laki Tassi's thighs are the size of my chest. And I'm not kidding. He is a massive human being, rugby player by trade. Who knows if he can play offensive line at the NFL level, but we'll figure it out. He certainly has the athletic tools to do it. And then Jalen Walker,
Jesus,
again.
He's 6'6", 350?
Dude, look at Google a picture of Laki Tassi. I saw it. They saw him.
Oh, fuck off. That's right? Going to be hitting a corner in space, and they're just going to evaporate. What the hell?
Yeah, so they have a rugby picture of him for his promo picture when he signed, and I was like, "Oh my God, look at his legs! So much power and drive in that lower half." So I just love that a new regime comes in and says, "Hey, we need a lot of talent. We are going to be changing over a lot of talent in terms of who fits with our program." We know we're not built. We know we're not ready. And whenever a team says, we're going to get 2 UDFAs, to me that says, nah, we're good. We've got it. Right? The Raiders clearly saying here, we don't got it. We're going to take as many chances. That's very much a Pete thing. In the first, the initial years of Pete and John Schneider in Seattle, over 50% of their starters were UDFAs at one point. They had 50 UDFAs make the team in the first, I think, 5 years of being in Seattle.
Crazy.
Yeah, it is a talent pool that he has tapped before, and I just love the mix. Are any of those guys going to make it? Look, UDFA chances for making it on a roster are really low. Are they going to make it on the practice squad? Probably. If you get one winner out of there, which is a rotational player out of UDFA that you got for free, you won. If you get 2 or 3 guys that fill out the practice squad, guys that are developmental at a position that's incredibly expensive, like offensive tackle, let's go. So just take those dart throws every year. It doesn't cost you any draft capital. The signing bonuses are typically pretty low. They're climbing, but overall they're very, very low. And I just love the approach here of we're going to grab every option we can to make our football team better.
So as we get, towards the end of this show and we look at the 3 questions that are the central pillar of all this, right? What was their identity before? Which they didn't really have one last year. What is their identity now? Which is a tough, physical, disciplined, run-first team that just beats you up and makes you hate life and spend the next 3 days in the cold tub. The last question that I think might be the hardest is, what is the goal for this season? And I think that is really tough because if you're looking at what the Raiders were last year, the goal should just be average, be watchable, be a legitimate, solid football team that has an identity to begin with, right? And use that as a stepping stone to the next couple of years. But if you're looking at all the moves that they made, bringing in a new quarterback, ideally fixing the offensive line, having a really experienced play caller in Chip Kelly that has taken his lumps and kind of evolved into being one of the better offensive play callers at any level of football. The Pete Carroll energy where he just has a knack for turning teams around quickly. I almost wonder if the goal isn't just be average. I wonder if the goal legitimately is like, let's go get a 6 seed. Like, let's make the playoffs. Like, why can't they make the playoffs? They got to hit a lot of green lights and thread a lot of needles along the way with health, because I think their defense is really thin, but you can see a world where this formula works. You can see a world where they rip off some wins that people don't expect against really good teams in this conference. And all of a sudden, it's like Christmas week, and they're in the hunt for a 6 or a 7 seed. And they just need to win one out of their next 2 games, and they can clinch a spot. Like, I don't think that's that far-fetched. And maybe that should be the goal. Maybe the goal shouldn't just be watchable. Maybe the goal should be make the playoffs. I struggle to get too amped up about this team because, we're going to talk about every single team in the league, and we always get so excited. But I look at the bones of this house, and I think it could work. I really do.
I think the logical side of our brain says stability should be the goal, right? You've been below average for several years in a row now. You should just stabilize and get to where you have an even chance to win every game. That's what the thinking side of our brain, and the side that's been conditioned by the last 3 years of Raider football, that's really where we land. I don't think that's the goal at all, because you look at the moves this team made in the offseason. They went and got a top 15 NFL quarterback, arguably top 10 in some very important categories. You drafted a running back 6th overall. You don't draft a running back in the top 10 if you think you're going to be average or you're several years away, because that running back will be used up. They're not acting like a team that's trying to be average. And I think your vision of being in the hunt, right? A lot of times we say, is a playoff spot the goal, or is it playoffs or bust? I think there's a tier right below that, which is late in the season, we're in the mix. And if it breaks the right way for us, we can get into the playoffs. We want to do that. And we see teams every year that make just a little bit more jump than you thought they should, right? They're a little bit better, a little bit sooner than we were giving them credit for. And I think the Raiders are well positioned to be one of those teams. Like you said, got to hit a lot of green lights. A lot of things have to mesh quickly and well. There's a lot of new pieces, new coaches, lots of new players, new quarterback, a lot of things that typically take some time to get up and running. But if you see this team starting to win games within the first 6 weeks, I think the end of the season gets a lot more interesting because, again, they're not bereft of talent. This is not a team that was completely tapped out roster-wise. They didn't do great with injuries, but they have top-tier NFL talent on the offense and on the defense. Enough? That's always the question. But it's not like they don't have star players. They do. So I think that's exactly the goal. And that's the way they're operating, is we could make the playoffs this year. It's not a certainty, but we're going to be in the hunt. We are not going to be out of it by Christmas. We are going to be in after Christmas and looking to knock some teams off and surprise some people and be one of those teams that is a little farther along in our first year of this rebuild than people thought we should be or would be.
And I got to say, if this is the worst team in the AFC West, oh my God.
Yeah.
It's going to be a destruction derby all season long. Like, this division is legitimately insane. Like, if the Raiders, who might be in the hunt for a wild card spot, are the worst team, because I don't think the Broncos are going to be worse. I don't think the Chargers are going to be worse. The Chiefs are still the Chiefs. Like, I don't care what anybody says. Like, they're not going anywhere. This could be the best division in football, even more than the NFC North, even more than the AFC North. This could be the kaiju division, and we have one every single year. So I'm fascinated to see how this all plays out. Reminder, we are talking about the rest of this division during this entire week. Tomorrow is Broncos. The day after that is Chargers. The day after that is Chiefs. And then on Friday, for all of our lovely patrons, we have our picks for who's going to win this division and who's going to be the Offensive Player of the Year in this division and who's going to be Defensive Player of the Year and Rookie of the Year for both offense and defense and Coach of the Year and our bold predictions for the AFC West. All of that is going in a bonus episode over on the Patreon on Friday. And if you're following along day after day and you want access to all of these numbers that we reference, you want to know the exact percentages of run concepts that these teams run out of shotgun versus under center, you want to look at cap space, you want to look at passing heat maps, anything you can think of, All of those infographics are also available to our patrons over at our Patreon link below or at the QR code on the screen. You know, we try to put together as much information as we can for you guys and present it as coherently as we can for you guys, honestly, and not overwhelm you with numbers. But if you want to be overwhelmed with numbers, you can find that over on the Patreon. And with that, EJ, one team down, 31 to go. 2 more months remain in the 2025 Bootleg Summer Series. Again, Broncos are tomorrow. How you feeling?
Hey, marathon, not a sprint. Got to start, right? This is only the first step. So much more to come. We're excited about it. We hope you are excited about it. We hope you'll follow along on the Patreon as well, because there is so much more information there this year than we have ever given you. Again, we're trying to curate all that stuff and give you the things we're think are most important, but you might think something else is really important, and you can find it over there. So please do. But we're looking forward to it. As always, we get jacked up, and that excitement carries us through the season. So we hope you're along for the ride with us.
We'll see you tomorrow.